Hello and welcome. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines this hour. President Donald Trump makes a sharp U-turn and now urges House Republicans to release the Epstein files as many prepare to defy his earlier demands. Trump says on Truth Social that the party should move on and focus on economic issues, calling the controversy a Democrat hoax. The United Nations says the conviction of former Bangladesh Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina is an important moment for victims, but should not have included a death sentence. The UN Rights Office also questions whether her trial in absentia met international fair trial standards due to due process. Japan moves to ease a growing row with China after Beijing warns its citizens against travelling there amid tensions over Taiwan. The dispute flared after Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi said a Chinese attack on Taiwan could trigger a Japanese military response. The BBC says it will fight any legal action from President Trump and insists there is no basis for a defamation case over its editing of his January the 6th speech. Trump threatens a $5 billion lawsuit claiming the broadcaster's edit created the false impression that he called for violence. Presidents Macron and Zelensky sign a letter of intent for Ukraine to acquire up to 100 Rafale jets and new air defense systems from French firms. Paris says the deal, spanning about 10 years, includes future contracts for SAMP-T systems, radars and drones to bolster Ukraine's war effort. At least 45 Indian pilgrims are feared dead after a bus crash near Medina in Saudi Arabia, with only one survivor undergoing treatment. Indian officials say a 24/7 control room is now active in Jeddah as Telangana's chief minister seeks urgent coordination with Riyadh. The death toll in the November the 10th Delhi blast near the popular tourist site Red Fort has now risen to 15, as 2 more people injured in the blast succumbed to their injuries earlier today. The death toll from a Russian missile strike on Balaklia in eastern Ukraine rises to 3, with 10 others wounded overnight. Local officials say the attack hit the city during the night and emergency crews are still working at the scene. We start this hour in Europe, and the Russian Defense Ministry reported that Russian troops had captured 2 key villages in eastern Ukraine. The first, Dvorchistansky, is located in the Kharkiv region, where soldiers were seen raising the Russian flag over a heavily damaged building. The location was confirmed through satellite imagery, although the exact date of the video couldn't be independently verified. The second, located in the Dnipropetrovsk region, was also claimed by Russian forces on the same day. Satellite imagery matched the features of the location, but again, the precise date of the video could not be confirmed. Since late June, Russian forces have expanded their control in both Dnipropetrovsk and neighbouring Zaporozhye regions, marking significant advances, with reports indicating that they have moved forward by at least 30 kilometres in recent weeks. Joining us now is Gilbert Doctorow. He's a Russia affairs expert and he joins us live from Brussels. Gilbert, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. Gilbert, Russia says it's advancing in both Dnipropetrovsk and in Kharkiv. From your vantage point, is this genuine momentum here by Moscow's forces?
Oh, it is momentum, but the notion that the war will end in 3 weeks with a Russian victory is utter nonsense. Of course, anything can happen, but a political collapse in Ukraine cannot be dismissed, considering the scandalous goings-on, political repercussions of the bribery, of the corruption that has been found in the midst of the Kiev government. However, looking strictly at the military, Russia has a long way to go before it reaches the Dnieper River, which more or less divides the country into 60% West Ukraine and 40% East Ukraine, not to mention taking the whole country. So the notion of a Russian all-out victory coming from these incremental gains of a settlement here and a settlement there is not obvious or persuasive. I'm looking at the two different locations that you've mentioned, Dnipropetrovsk, which is farther to the west, and Kharkiv, which is right on the border with Russia. I would say that for the Russian purposes of ensuring their own security, or any settlement comes out of this war, the gains in Kharkov Oblast are much more important. Kharkov was used as a staging ground for the incursions in two Russian border areas. Kursk, of course, is the best known of these, going back to August of last year. Now, that's so for Russia to take in hand Kharkiv Oblast or province is a security issue of the first importance, and therefore they are very keen to stress their gains. Let us remember that Kharkiv, that is the city of the city for which the province has the same name, Kharkiv city is the second largest city in Ukraine. It also is basically a Russian-speaking city. So the Russian armed forces are being very cautious in the way they are taking over this oblast and hoping to subjugate the city. They don't want to cause extensive civilian casualties because the civilians who would suffer are basically Russian speakers.
Gilbert, I also wanted to get your reaction to the diplomatic developments today, mainly being the one that Ukraine will obtain up to 100 French-made Rafale warplanes over the next 10 years under a deal signed today. Also, of course, in the deal are air defense systems, munitions and drones, which were signed into in a letter of intent by Zelensky and Macron. Going into the winter months, is this going to make any difference to Ukraine's war effort?
In terms of morale, yes. In terms of actual military improvement of the situation, of course, no. 10 years is a long time for delivery of these Rafales, and who knows what kind of Ukraine will exist 3 months, 6 months, a year from now, not to mention 10 years from now. But in the terms of morale and the evident support, I would say desperate support of Western European countries for Ukraine and for Mr. Zelensky's regime, this is, of course, significant, as significant in his own way as the deal which Mr. Zelensky reached over the weekend with his Greek counterparts for supply of natural gas. So that is essentially liquefied natural gas coming from the United States through a northern corridor from Greece up into Ukraine, so that Ukraine will have some supply of gas after Russia has virtually destroyed its own gas production.
Yes, Gilbert, Dr. O, do stay with us as we have further updates coming out of Europe. Finland's President Alexander Stubb has expressed hope that European Union leaders will find solutions to address Belgium's concerns over using frozen Russian assets to fund Ukraine. During a joint press conference with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, Stubb said he plans to meet with Belgium's Prime Minister Bart de Wever. Let's listen in to what Stubb has said.
When it comes to funding Ukraine, it seems rather clear that there are three options. The first one is that EU member states, or NATO member states for that matter, pay directly, either by taking more loans or using current reserves. The second option is the mutualization of debt on a European level, as was done with Next Generation Europe and with SAFE. And the third option, of course, is the use of the immobilized assets. I will discuss these matters today with Belgium's Prime Minister. I think a lot of European leaders have understood the concerns that Belgium has in this situation, both political and legal. And I hope that when leaders start moving towards the European Council of December, that solutions will be found. because it is of utmost importance that we continue to fund Ukraine in its fight for its existence and survival.
Gilbert joins us from Brussels. Gilbert, Belgium is blocking the EU's plan to use these frozen Russian assets. What is Belgium concerned about? Legal fallout, Russian retaliation, or economic exposure?
All three. The points that Mr. Stubb was making were precisely repeating remarks made by Ursula von der Leyen a week ago. This was not his speech. He took up her speech and made it his own. Considering the news that we've discussed a couple of minutes ago, the question of what happens to Russian frozen assets that are in Euroclear in Belgium, whether they can be used in one way or another to provide funding for the war effort in Ukraine over the next 2 years, that is of cardinal importance. Frankly speaking, as it looks now, if Mr. De Wever, the Prime Minister of Belgium, cannot be persuaded that his European colleagues are standing by him and will share the risks that Belgium faces, if that does not happen, then I think a collapse of the Ukrainian war effort is predictable in the foreseeable future, meaning the next 6 months, shall we say, because Rafale aircraft from France will do no good if the Ukrainian army is not being paid because there's no money. And that is a situation. The country is desperately in need of funds. Europe doesn't have the money. Looking at the three options that Mr. Stubb mentioned, Europe does not have the money, the reserves to make available to Belgium, to Russia. Its only easy solution is confiscating, essentially stealing, the Russian assets that are now parked in Euroclear under sanctions. Belgium's Prime Minister is unlike the other 26 European member states, or at least 25 of them, in that he is genuinely concerned with the welfare of his country and not with ideology. He is a nationalist. He is a pocketbook nationalist, not an ethnic nationalist. And that tells you the whole story. He's concerned about the welfare, the economic prosperity of Belgium, and a case of taking 140 billion euros of Russian assets that are now in Belgian hands and giving them over to Ukraine would put Belgium in every possible liability, legal liability, and a possible military response from Russia. I am told by Flemish journalists that Mr. De Wever is shaking in his boots. He also knows about Russian Oreshniks, and he wouldn't like to see them headed for Brussels.
Yes, Gilbert, of course, as you've said, the European Union is made up of 27 countries, all with different governments. If the EU can't agree internally on how to use Moscow's frozen funds, does that signal weakening political will behind Ukraine?
Absolutely. The game will be up. The game will be up not on the battlefield, because despite all the cheerleading by so many visible people in the alternative media in the West, the reality is that victory on the battlefield for the Russians is not going to happen tomorrow, as I've made plain earlier. The political collapse of Ukraine is far more probable. If there's no money to pay the officials in the army, the country will collapse. And if Europe cannot mobilize behind Mr. De Wever and behind Belgium to ensure that his country alone will not be exposed to Russian vengeance, then the game is up.
Yeah, and do you believe that Russia would retaliate if the EU ultimately transfers revenue from frozen assets to Ukraine? Many critics say this is against international law.
Oh, it isn't against international law. As Mr. De Wever himself said in his speech 2 weeks ago, in which he refused to go along with the pressure of his colleagues, even in World War II, there was no effort to confiscate the state assets of the belligerent countries. Therefore, for Europe now to do that to Europe, to Russian assets, as is being discussed and as is being prioritized by von der Leyen, is a precedent,
Yes.
a very dangerous precedent. Normally, confiscation of state assets is possible only in a state of war. That's international law.
Yes, Gilbert Doctorow, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World, and thank you for taking the time. We now move on, and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has expressed his gratitude as he and French President Emmanuel Macron signed an accord in Paris, calling the agreement a historic one. According to the agreement, Ukraine will be purchasing around 100 Rafale jets, as well as anti-air defences and drones from France, providing a crucial boost to Ukraine's war effort amid Russian attacks and recent battlefield setbacks. Zelensky, after signing the letter of intent with French President Emmanuel Macron at the Villa Coublay Air Force Base in southwest of Paris, says that they will have the greatest air defence system with President Macron's help. Meanwhile, Macron says that some of the deliveries of drones, interceptor drones and guided bombs would come in the very short term, with manufacturing commitments made for the coming 3 years. Let's listen in to President Zelensky.
Україна зможе отримати 100 літаків Рафаль F-4, дуже сильні французькі радари, 8 систем протиповітряної оборони, самці, по 6 пускових. Ну це деталі, напевно, це для когось технічні деталі, а для нас це важливо. Кожна пускова, все це захист кожного життя. Це дуже важливо. Необхідні для нашого захисту ракети та керовані. Це стратегічна домовленість, яка працюватиме 10 років від наступного року. Ми розуміємо всі основи цієї домовленості. Політичні, фінансові, промислові. Це історична угода. Дуже цінно, що Франція робить такий крок для досягнення реальної гарантованої безпеки в Європі. Є сильний пакет оборони, підтримки України, є Рафалі, і тут це, я впевнений, історичне рішення. А що нас можна посилювати? Я вам скажу, що це дуже серйозний флот, який будуємо ми для України. Ми говоримо про нове покоління самці. Ми працюємо з самці, дякую Еммануелю. І нове покоління – це дуже серйозний рівень. Ви знаєте, що ми працюємо з патріотами проти балістики. Новий рівень самці – це проти.
We move on, and China says that it has made progress in financial and economic areas with Germany after Finance Minister Lars Klingbeil met Vice Premier He Lifeng for the German-Chinese financial dialogue in Beijing. China's Vice Premier, while speaking at a news conference, reaffirmed the importance of prioritizing the development of a comprehensive strategic partnership between China and Germany, making clear the direction and focus for future in-depth cooperation. Let's listen in to Vice Premier Li Haifeng.
通过多双边渠道加强宏观经济政策的协调，推动两国和全球经济的增长，促进全球的金融稳定。双方强调，愿共同维护全球产业链、供应链的安全稳定，将大力维护和加强全球产业链、供应链，包括稀土在内的稳定安全，将致力于维护多边主义，反对单边主义、保护主义，反对脱钩断链。两国金融机构在贸易、投资、中小企业、航运金融等领域加强合作。双方在对话后举行了中德金融界圆桌会议，就加强金融市场的务实合作达成了积极的共识。双方认同各国分歧与争端应当通过对话协商和平解决，同意通过加强对话，共同应对当前全球面临的挑战。
Meanwhile, Klingbeil says that Germany addressed the topic of Chinese overcapacity in key sectors such as steel, solar and electric mobility during talks at the China-Germany financial dialogue. Klingbeil became the first representative of the new coalition government of Germany to visit China. Ties between the two industrial powerhouses have been strained over Chinese export curbs on chips and rare earths in particular, causing major disruptions for German firms. Let's listen in to Minister Klingbeil.
Für Deutschland und für Europa will ich klar sagen, wir setzen auf offene Märkte und wir setzen auf faire Wettbewerbsbedingungen. Wir scheuen den Wettbewerb nicht, aber klar ist auch, er muss fair sein. Ein zentrales Thema ist für mich der Zugang zu kritischen Rohstoffen. Ich habe heute deutlich gemacht, dass wir hier für deutsche und für europäische Unternehmen Verlässlichkeit und Stabilität brauchen, dass die ungerechtfertigte Anwendung von Exportkontrollen eine ernsthafte Bedrohung für die Weltwirtschaft darstellt. Ich habe in meinen heutigen Gesprächen die Zusage der chinesischen Seite erhalten, dass deutsche und europäische Sorgen über die Ausfuhrbeschränkungen bei seltenen Erden und bei kritischen Rohstoffen, dass sie ernst genommen werden und dass wir gemeinsame Lösungen im Sinne eines verlässlichen Zugangs und im Sinne verlässlicher Lieferketten finden wollen. Wir haben auch über die Überkapazitäten in Schlüsselsektoren wie Stahl, Solar- oder Elektromobilität diskutiert. Wir sehen hier von deutscher Seite einen fairen Wettbewerb gefährdet und sehen auch, dass Industriearbeitsplätze und Arbeitsplätze außerhalb Chinas auch bei uns in Deutschland gefährdet sind. Ich habe betont, dass es gemeinsame Aufgabe sein sollte, den Abbau dieser Überkapazitäten anzugehen und damit auch für stabile Wettbewerbsbedingungen zu sorgen. Ich will hier betonen, dass China ein zentraler globaler Akteur ist, politisch, wirtschaftlich, technologisch. Und umso wichtiger ist es, durch persönliche Begegnungen dann auch mit China zu reden, statt nur über China zu sprechen. Das ist heute geschehen und das werden wir in den kommenden Tagen weiter.
Stay with us next as we move over to the Middle East. And Israeli far-right National Security Minister Itamar Ben Gvir has called on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to take drastic actions against Palestinian leadership if the United Nations endorses the recognition of a Palestinian state. Ben Gvir urged Netanyahu to order targeted assassinations of senior Palestinian Authority officials and to arrest Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas in response to the potential move by the United Nations. Let's take a listen in.
בימים האחרונים אנחנו עדים לשובו של השיח סביב הקמת מדינה פלסטינאית. היוזמה הזאת עולה בכל פעם באופן שונה. היום היא עלולה לקבל דחיפה נוספת בהצעה שעולה במועצת הביטחון של האו"ם, תחת נוסח של נתיב מסומן לאותה מדינה. ובכן צריך להגיד את הדברים כהווייתם בצורה הכי ברורה. לעם הזה, לעם המומצא, שמכונה עם פלסטיני, אסור שתהיה לו מדינה. אם הם יאיצו את ההכרה במדינה המומצאת הזאת, אם האו"ם יכיר בדבר הזה, אתה, אדוני ראש הממשלה, צריך להורות על סיכולים ממוקדים של בכירי הרשות, שהם מחבלים לכל דבר, לכל עניין, ואתה, אדוני ראש הממשלה, צריך להורות על מעצרו של אבו מאזן. יש לנו בכלא קציעות תא מוכן עבורו, לקבל תנאים כמו של כל המחבלים בבתי הכלא, ואני קורא לראש הממשלה, תעצור את אבו מאזן, אני אטפל בו.
The UN Security Council is scheduled to vote on a US-backed resolution that supports Donald Trump's Gaza peace plan. Unlike previous versions, this draft includes language that recognizes the possibility of a future Palestinian state, marking a significant shift in the diplomatic landscape. The resolution has been a source of controversy, particularly among Israeli hardliners who view any recognition of Palestinian statehood as a threat to Israeli security. Joining us now is Andrew Latham. He is an international relations expert and he joins us live from Minneapolis. Your reaction to Itamar Ben Gvir, Israel's national security advisor, and his calls for the assassination of Palestinian Authority officials if this UN resolution moves forward?
Well, unfortunately, it's hardly surprising. He's playing to his base, and that base looks very unfavorably at any prospect, however remote, of a Palestinian state. that might bump up against the Jewish state of Israel. But there's no doubt in my mind that he also believes this. He's not just catering to or pandering to his base, he's part of his own base. And for that base, even the remote prospect of a Palestinian state is anathema. They simply won't abide it. And that's why the rhetoric has ramped up the way it has.
Indeed. Andrew, thank you very much. Do stay with us as we have further updates coming out of the Middle East. And next, Palestinian Deputy Foreign Minister Omar Awadallah has called for international intervention to block an Israeli bill proposing the death penalty for those convicted of acts of terrorism. Let's listen.
لذلك هناك رسائل بالفعل تم إرسالها إلى كل وزراء الخارجية في كل دول العالم في الحديث عن قانون الأسرى وإعدام الأسرى الفلسطينيين ومطالبة هذه الدول بالتحرك بشكل سريع لوقف هذا القانون، بالإضافة إلى الشهادات المروعة التي سمعنا عنها وتابعناها ووثقناها ستقدم وقدمت جزء منها إلى ليس فقط المحاكم الدولية بل إلى الجهات الدولية كالمقررين الخاصين ولجان التحقيق الدولية. هناك We will be using all the available diplomatic, legal and political tools to bring the perpetrators of the crime of torture against our prisoners, of the crime of sexual abuse, of the crimes of rape that we documented, and all the organizations in Palestine already documented these testimonies. We will be following this track legally, politically and diplomatically.
The bill, backed by far-right National Security Minister Itamar Ben Gvir, targets individuals accused of deadly attacks on Israelis, particularly Palestinians. The bill has passed the first reading in the Knesset and must go through 2 more readings before becoming law. Palestinian officials have sent urgent letters to global leaders urging them to take swift action against the proposed law. Andrew, of course, we saw this law passed through its first stage just a few days ago, which obviously led to Itamar Ben Gvir even handing out sweets to members of the Knesset after it passed through. Israel's proposed death penalty bill for terrorism suspects has, of course, drawn sharp criticism. Why does the government think that this is the right time to pass such a law?
Making some concessions under this Trump peace plan, ceasefire/peace plan. And again, has to be concerned, I think, about the coalition of which the Israeli right is represented by Ben Gvir and others, that they're not going soft on Palestinian terrorism, that force will be met with force, as it were, and that this signals to their base, but also to the broader population and also to the Palestinian population, that we're not going soft. If you perpetrate these crimes against us, we will retaliate in the harshest way possible, the death sentence. Needs to be said, it still has to go through 2 more readings. The first reading in British parliamentary tradition is very loosey-goosey, it's very nebulous, it's not about the details. And of course, we always know where to look for the devil. It's always in the details. So second reading and then final reading will really reveal if this has traction or if this is just showmanship.
Yes, Andrew Latham, thank you very much, as always, for joining us here on NewsX World. Well, that's all that we have time for this hour, but keep following us here for more world news updates. Thank you.